This is the final word story time. It's number 230. Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins resplendent in the Lord's Taverners hoodie with a cricket ball in hand, as is his wont. Still fresh off marathon running. The show's brought to you by Maurice Blackburn, the number one plaintiff law firm in the country. I regret that I can't remember whose idea this was, but I remembered it too late. That somebody, like, you should have run the entire half marathon with the ball in hand so you could arrive at the finish line and deliver it, and then just make a gag about being off the long run. I'm sorry, whoever's joke it is that I stole one of our correspondents.
It's not a bad one. When we were waiting to watch Haley, and we spent a lot of time watching marathon runners finish. Probably, I don't know, 20 of us. And by this point, we'd had a beer or two at brunch, and we came back and we were ready to roll. And it was pouring with rain. It was blistering sun. It was so windy. It was a weird old day. And we saw a chap run past, ending a marathon in his full batting kit and running to the line with a bat in his hand. And you could just tell he'd done, and he was playing cover drives all the way up to the finish line. Works for some, not for me.
Would have been great to touch in and then turn back and do the other half marathon in the other direction.
That could have been the play for Haley. But yes, indeed. So I'm ready to, I've got a few of these hoodies over the years and I've been rotating through them. They're all going in the wash tonight and then we can move on for a little while on that front. But yes, the 230th story time, Cat 230 for the Australian men. Rex Sellers, who's an interesting story of himself, having played one test in 1964 in Calcutta, having been an Ashes tourist in 64, the brother of Basil, the great entrepreneur partly what I think of Rex is having Rex and Basil, the Sellers family. I interviewed Basil a number of times in 2016 around the sculptures. It was his idea with the sculptures, specifically what happened at Adelaide and Sydney. They're kind of his brainchild there, having seen what they did in Melbourne. I think that's the chronology. Anyway, point is that he's left a lasting impression by dint of those sculptures around those cricket grounds, and they're something I've had a fairly active interest in. So yes, 230 was his brother, who was a spinner for one test in 64, and I know that leads beautifully, Jeff, into something you want to talk about.
It does. This was a bit of correspondence from quite a while ago from Matthew McIntosh, and I mentioned it briefly at some point a few months ago, but I'd lost the actual message itself, which I've now found this again. Revisiting this in light of talking about Bill Ponsford last week, because Matthew sent this message through saying, William Morris Laurie, 18,734 first-class runs, 50 hundreds, 150s, test and one-day captain. At the time of his retirement, held the record for most Victorian matches played. Love for the MCG unrivalled. Love for cricket unparalleled. Let's not wait for some opportunistic parasite of a politician to erect a statue after his passing. Let's celebrate Bill Laurie now while we still can. Let's get one built. And I think this is a clarion clear call to arms. Who's got a statue at the G? Shane Warne, DK Lilly, Neil Harvey, Ponsford, Bradman, Miller. Like, what better addition than Bill Laurie? Doesn't that just seem right?
Yes, I think I've argued for this on the show before as well, that Laurie should have a sculpture at the G. I'm kind of surprised that he doesn't. And I absolutely agree with the sentiment of doing these things before people pass away. So it's related, but kind of unrelated. It is to the MCG. With Robert Walls passing away last week, and one of the great highlights of my career was interviewing Wolsey when making the 93 documentary or series with Shannon Gill and Dan Brettig a number of years ago now, and him talking about the Brisbane team he coached in 93. The retrospective Norm Smith medal idea has been rattling around forever, and Gilly and I have both written about it and talked about it and argued for it and so on. And last week when Robert Walls passed away, of course, he was best on in the great 1972 grand final. Now it's come to light again. We got to get onto this, because a lot of the players who were in the criteria being you want to do it on games that were televised. It's a bit too hard, I think, realistically, to go back and do any credible resourcing of games before they were on TV. Up until the first Norm Smith in 1979, famously, with Wayne Harms and so on. But you don't want all of those players to basically pass away before someone realises that it's an idea worth investing in. And so it applies to this as well. Bill Laurie did a beautiful interview with our great mate Adam White about, 6 months ago for the Victorian State Cricket Podcast, and hearing Bill's voice again, it's not as strong as it used to be, and it's not as forthright, and his love for the game it has evolved since he finished working as a full-time commentator. But the contribution he's made to Victorian cricket, he is an icon. And let's have some iconography around the ground to give people the chance to remember what he did as a player, but also respect what he's meant to the game across decades. Great idea. Let's get it done.
And while we're at it, I wouldn't mind seeing a statue for a Victorian fast bowler somewhere. We've got Keith Miller, the all-rounder, but we've got Lily from WA. There's no Victorian quick. You could argue whether, maybe it is Scott Boland, maybe it's Merv, maybe it's Peter Siddle. Or the other one that really surprises me is that there hasn't been a move for a Meg Lanning one yet. Meg Lanning still has the Australian record she still has the world record for one-day tons, Australian record for T20 runs for the moment. Beth Mooney will get her any second, but having been retired for a couple of years at this point, almost the record for ODI runs, she's just behind Belinda Clarke and Karen Rolton, but they played a lot more games. Captained how many world titles, how many trophies did they win under her stewardship? Youngest captain Australia had, huge career. Just seems logical that she's done more than enough to deserve one. Anyway,
I agree. I think they will. I reckon that's a pretty good shout. Remembering that Belinda Clarke had one made for her at the SCG, which I would suggest has only been released in the last 8 or 9 seasons, Jeff, maybe.
It was more recently than that, I think. It was about 3 years ago.
It's while we've been covering cricket anyway. Like it's a relatively new thing in terms of the configuration there at the SCG. So yeah, I would hope. And there aren't many women either. There's the Betty Cuthbert. I wonder whether there's Shirley Strickland, of course. Strickland and Cuthbert. Which makes perfect sense based on 1956.
As Olympians, sure.
Yeah, around the back of the Olympic stand. But
and probably the most significant Australian female cricketer, certainly in terms of leadership and captaincy, would give her the edge over Perry, who played for Victoria for 5 minutes, but I don't think that warrants one. But in terms of a Melbourne connection, that's right, the Lanning one makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, well, let's campaign. Let's get a politician. By the way, we can slag off politicians all we want, but it's ultimately they're representatives of the people. So let's work with the political establishment here. Let's talk to some politicians.
Yes.
Let's text Annika after the show and say, "Hey, I got an idea. Speak to the MCG. Get things." I don't think she'll need much encouragement from Meg Lanning.
Let's get Bill and Meg's excellent adventure with a statue of the G.
I'm sure we'd get a good hearing from the federal. Recently reappointed federal sports minister. Let's see how we go on that front. Hey, one more thing, Jeff. You mentioned this show's brought to us by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. We're about to run into what will probably be, let's have no caveat on this, what will be our most downloaded series of shows ever, which will be the England-India test matches, the daily eps that come up through I think it's the 19th of June, Jeff, the first test in Leeds rings a bell, through to the first week of August. Based on our projections with what we do with the pod and how we continue to grow faster and faster, and you throw into the mix it being an England summer, you throw into the mix it being India visiting for 5 test matches. We'll do better in that series on audio and video than anything we've ever done before. We currently don't have a commercial partner lined up for that. We'd love to. Because ultimately that's what makes the world go round for us, along with our wonderful patrons and other partners of us. But specifically for those daily shows, that can be you. I do these things directly with you. This isn't some sort of agency thing where it's all a bit removed. It's directly working with us. You become part of our stable, part of our family, part of our crew, and that is what helps us do what we do 365 days a year. So info@finalwordcricket.com, adam@finalwordcricket.com. Let's have a conversation, and we give you ridiculous value compared to what it is, because that's the kind of people that we are. We go above and beyond every bloody episode. Why wouldn't we?
And that is why Storytime has gone from being an episode that might have 20 numbers on it to an episode that, well, this week has 4. We're going to extract full value from those. Let's play No Pledge. No Pledge, the game we play with the nice people on the internet who fund this program, the patrons of the show. They send through. Oh, and good news from Patron recently is that Apple have lost their court case. That means that they were screwing people who were subscribing through the Patron app on iPhones. They were all getting dudded for extra money. That can't happen anymore. The gavel has come down on the side of justice in that case. So if you were someone who was worried about that.
Unless, of course, Apple want to partner with us for England-India, in which case we retract it all.
Retract it all. You can have 30%. No, we have principles and we're standing up for them this week at least. Nerd Pledge. People sign up. It's a voluntary subscription. They subscribe for an amount of money of their choice, and that amount varies depending on what cricket story they want told. They give us a clue with the number, or the number is a clue. Liam Fallon, $2.15 in USD. So the number is 215. We can interpret that as we want. Liam said, I don't think it warrants your on-air attention, or at least not as much as it preoccupied the attention of Chris Rogers. Adam, what do you got?
Well, 215 Chris Rogers isn't the direct hit, but it's not about Chris Rogers, is it? It's about something that happens, I suppose, along with
something that had his attention.
It has attention. And if you're 22 yards away when making a test 215, that would meet the criteria, wouldn't it? And that's indeed what happened some 10 years ago at the home of cricket.
Oof,
Lords.
That's scary.
Yeah, I know, right? I had a look at the dates.
Recently.
Yeah, it doesn't adjust. It's the 27th of May when we're recording this episode for the weekend that's coming up. Well, this innings that I'm about to tell you about started on the 16th of July, 2015, which is, as I say, nearly a decade ago. A wild time for us, really. That was when the start of that series is when we were kind of allowed to do things that we now do in a grown-up kind of way. It was when the first organisation that commissioned the final word, not that it was called the final word then, which was the ABC, gave us a little bit of a run-up to do podcasts at the end of a test match, and we were in England writing for the ABC website, and one thing kind of led to another. I was doing videos with Jim Maxwell, not you at Stumps. It was the way it all played out with Jim out there during that series. And when Jim went home, I picked up some of the commentary, and you and I picked up the videos, and we were just, I don't know how to describe it now in hindsight, but just kind of scrapping away. We stayed on floors during that summer. We stayed in like any room that anyone had going. At Cardiff in that first test match, a mate had a spare hostel bunk, so I stayed in that. At Lords, the test I'm about to tell you about now, a friend had a spare bedroom in a budget hotel on the Strand, so I stayed there for a few nights. It was, it was just, that was the way we saw the world. Like, we had to justify every dollar or pound that we were spending and trying to make.
Well, every pound was about $3, which was also part of the problem.
True. That's it. So, yeah, we didn't actually do an episode of The Final Word after Cardiff, and I don't remember why.
It was because one of us wasn't there or something. I think it hadn't got signed off yet. I think I reckon the podcast part, because we were doing that with the ABC, and I don't think they'd agreed to let us do it yet. We were negotiating being allowed to do it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because before Cardiff, we did one with Vish and Will, the demo that we've referred to
demo.
later, which we did release, I think, on SoundCloud.
No, I haven't released it. I've still got it. I've got it in the back pocket. Our 10-year anniversary is in about 5 weeks, I think. So maybe 6 weeks. So I'm holding on to that. That might be a release around then, just for fun.
That might be a patron-only jobby. I reckon that was pretty shit.
Probably.
I don't think that was very good at all. But
that's all right, people. Sometimes you gotta go. Here's the Super 8 footage of, you doing a concert in your parents' living room when you're 8 years old, and you're like, I'm Kylie Minogue. Sometimes that shit's got to get played at a 21st birthday, and this is our equivalent, because I think one or other of us will be dead before we get to 21 years.
Let's hope not. That could be rather problematic, given I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So let's not wish death upon us. That's going morbid. Now, well, actually, I'm going to be self-referential to some old work here in a sec, which I was surprisingly happy with. But, so we're writing for the ABC, and this first day of this second test match, it was a big deal for us. Like, let's not, I know you'd done 2013, but we were here in a more established capacity. I've been lucky to attend Lord's test matches on day one in 05 and 2009, but this felt different in 15, going in and, putting on a nice jacket, I suppose, and going in an iron shirt. And,
Wouldn't know. I've still never had that experience.
In my case, thinking, let's dress semi-nice because we're, meant to be doing a job here. And sitting down to watch Australia bat first on a day, well, at a time when the Lord's strip was far less juicy than it is these days. There was probably a 2 or 3 year period when it was very, very flat. 2016, Middlesex went on to win the championship. I think they drew every game they played at Lord's that year, but they won away from home, and they didn't lose at Lord's because nobody was losing at Lord's is kind of my point. It was very, very flat there. Different these days where it tends to be a results pitch more often than not. Anyway, so, look, I know we want to talk about Steve Smith here, but I'm just going to do the Chris Rogers bit first, because I always view that day as more him than Smith. So going into it,
The late cuts down the hill. That's all. That's what I remember. So many.
We're getting there. So Chris had played for Middlesex and captained there since 2014. So he had plenty of experience at the ground. He averaged 55 at Lords. He'd made 7 centuries there. He'd played a test match there in 2013, which was a total misadventure, being hit in the box and not being able to review the Jeff Lemon.
Not being willing to review, not being. They had one left. He was just too scared to use it because he'd already told Watson to burn the other one.
Well, you're the authority on this, on the Hey Watson video that was one of the things that helped break you in your early days, ranting at a camera at the front of the North Gate there. Anyway, so
I didn't know at the time it wasn't Shane Watson's fault because it was Rogers who told me that. He said that was my call.
Yeah. So anyway, so Steve Waugh, good bit of colour in. So I kind of went back and thought, I wonder what I wrote. So I went to the ABC website. I didn't remember this. Steve Waugh had been the reminded Rogers before the test of his record at Lords, just to kind of bolster his confidence. And another nice bit of detail was that Michael Clarke called heads for the first time in his career, and it came up heads, and he was able to win the toss in turn. So had he gone with tails as he'd done for his whole life. Now, this is one time, Jeff, when we can, we often say you can't rewrite history based on one event. Well, a toss of a coin is binary. Had Clarke called tails like he always did, the coin would have fallen
the same way, regardless of the
way. Yeah, so Australia would have fielded that day. So it does prove instructive that Clarke had changed his mind that morning to try and change his luck, and so it proved. Now, the hit in the box a couple of years earlier, so a bit different for Rogers this time. It was in terrific nick. But he was nearly out in the first over. He edged over third slip, and he thought, as he said in the presser, he thought he was out when contact got made with the bat, but it flew over the cordon. I think Jimmy was bowling that first over. And different to normal, because Rogers, in his book with Dan Brettig and other times when interviewing him, he had a habit of, he sort of taught himself when playing in England how to play the ball, to roll the ball off his bat in such a way that edges would fall short of the cordon. That was part of his method when playing in England, to try and get the angle of the bat working downwards in a way that would make it harder for the ball to actually make it to the cordon. So, the fact that this went over the slips is interesting on that part. Anyway, so he got to 23 in a hurry from 26 balls. Then he went down the gears to score 20 from his next 56. In the middle of all of that, David Warner misses out when trying to slog Moeen just before lunch, and Chris said in the presser later that Davey will look back on today and he will kick himself, and he's right. Now, remember Warner speaking about it later, the great missed opportunity to make a test 100 at Lords. Well, Rogers, for his part, he wasn't going to miss out. Jeff, you talk about those cuts. I put it in my article at the time on 56, 60, 83 and 89, all off Moeen. 4 late cuts, all behind point, all go for 4. So, he's into the 90s. And this reminded me of what you were doing at the time, documenting the Rogers problematic conversion rate, because he had, 7 innings in a row where he'd been out between 50 and 100, including the 95 the previous week at Cardiff, which was an all-time record.
Yeah, see, I didn't think it was problematic. I just thought it was fun. I was enjoying it. But in terms of players who've made 750-plus scores in a row, there are a few of those Everton weeks. Andy Flower, Shiv Chandapal, Kumar Sangakkara had all done it previously, but all of their tallies involved a few centuries. Rogers had gone 55 and 55 in Brisbane against India, which is where I'd started paying attention to this because matching scores. Then 57 and 69 in Melbourne, then got out for 95 in Sydney in the first innings, and then 56 in the second. And so he had 6 in a row. And when he went to Cardiff, I was like desperate for him to get to 50. I was barracking so hard for him to get to 50. And then as soon as he got there, barracking for him to get out, because I wanted him to have the sequence, because he would have been the first to have a sequence of 7 half centuries that weren't converted. And lo and behold, I feel kind of bad about it now, because he got to 95 in Cardiff, and then I'm sure he would have much preferred to have a ton than to have this niche record, but it wasn't to be. And he ended up with the 7 in a row, the first to do it.
Yeah, leg before wicket, I reckon it was at Cardiff. And then, Lords, I'm glad he gets the 100 here, which we'll explain in a sec, because it ends up being his last test ton. So, and he well and truly earned it. I remember after play in that press conference in the ECB offices where they used to do the press conferences. They still do press conferences down there. Him being quite emotional, sat next, not like emotional in like the Glenn Maxwell kind of way where he's in tears or anything, more in the Bucky being offering a lot. in that, giving very strong quotes.
Oh, yeah.
He used to be a terrific press conference buck because he would just, get out there and tell you, as he is now when he commentates. Actually, he's very happy to answer questions freely and doesn't feel constrained by, I guess, being taken out of context or whatever, because he's naturally an articulate guy.
And he would tell you about feelings. He would tell you about vulnerabilities. He wouldn't say, "Oh yeah, obviously fantastic, terrific to get 100, and really fantastic to get that in front of a big crowd." He would say, "Oh, I was scared shitless at this point, or I was worried about that, or I had this concern about this, and then I managed to overcome that with that." And you would get an actual picture of what was happening internally.
Yeah, and he said that it's so special. There was the quote that was pulled out of all of that, and the fact that he played his defining Lord's innings when he was nearly 38, and he'd announced to the world that would, in all probability, be his final Test series, and so it proved when he announced his retirement before the Oval match. He faced 300 balls in that innings for 173 when he was dismissed on day 2. By that point, he put on 285 with Steve Smith. As I say, to be his final Test ton, but he still did plenty good in that series and won the Compton Miller Medal for the best Australian player in that Ashes. I remember Gideon wrote a piece. I couldn't find it because it was paywalled behind the Australian, and I don't subscribe to that newspaper. But Gideon wrote about it in terms of the book he'd written perhaps not long before that around the history of the office, and like talking about Rogers in those terms, about being kind of like a diligent person that went to work and did what they needed to do and clocked off and went home. And I guess there is something to that with the way he kept the game rather simple. Down the other end, of course, Steve Smith, who the pledge is actually about. So I should at least talk a little bit about that for Liam, given he's a new pledger. So Smith, 215, as is the number. He made 199 at Jamaica a few weeks earlier than that. I was commentating on radio when he was on 199, and Trapp's leg before. DRS was called into action for it. And he kind of slumped off the field very slowly there at Sabina Park.
It was pretty plumb, wasn't it? On the ankle, swinging in on the ankle in front of middle.
I think it was Roach. I want to say Roach.
I reckon it was it Fidel?
Oh, gosh. For some reason, I feel like Kemo Roach, but it could easily be, could have been Edwards. I don't remember now. Could have been Jerome Taylor even.
Maybe it was Jerome.
Yeah, Jerome Taylor was still bowling quickly in 2015. Anyway, so Smith here... Smith was going to bet on 129 that day in Australia with 337 for 1. Earlier in the day, he was dropped on 50, but I watched the highlights of this. This is when Steve Smith was like a machine going across his stumps. I recall Graham Swan being quoted before. Swan was not long retired, and he was strident that Smith's ascension to number 1, it couldn't be sustained. No one could bat the way he was without eventually running into trouble batting across his stumps. But to this point, didn't look like this run could ever end, right? He's only 26. In the piece I wrote about that, I said there was a nagging familiarity already to him doing things just like this. And the way you and I and others interpreted this when he got out for 215, reverse sweeping, was that he'd actually thrown away a triple, which shows the standard he was being graded against at the time when he was so untouchable. Funnily enough, there's a quote. Well, I say funnily enough, it's very Smith. He described it as getting the monkey off the back with a 200. Like, how funny is that someone would think of getting out close to 200 without a double as being a monkey on their back? It, again, goes to how well he was traveling.
Really struggling to convert my 190s to 200s.
That's it. He got to 200 with a beautifully timed clip off Moeen Ali, which was the first Australian at Lords to get a double since Bill Brown in 1938, after Bradman got his famous 254 there 8 years prior. And the other thing I wanted to just touch on here, Jeff, is that this all happened at number 3. Now, I reckon it's forgotten that part of the Steve Smith glorious, most purple of purple patches actually did occur at number 3 between 2015 and 2017. He played 29 test innings at 3 for 1,744 runs at 67 with 8 centuries and five other scores above 50. So we think about his overall numbers at 4, which are also stunning. Like, he averages 62 at number 4, where he's made 23 of his centuries. But I reckon sometimes we get a little bit of recency bias around Smith and 4, partly because of how badly the opening thing went. Because if you go back to 15 to 17, and I know that he batted 4 occasionally in that stretch as well, but he was untouchable for much of that time at number 3. So, I'm not saying for a moment that Smith should bat number 3 in the World Test Championship final. He's happy batting 4. Let the guy be happy. He's made 36 Test hundreds. He's entitled to do that to some extent. He can do whatever he wants. But yeah, I just thought that was worth dropping in there. He at the time said it was his best innings for Australia. I doubt he would still say that. I think that the innings he played at Brisbane to start the 17-18 Ashes, the innings against India at Pune in 17, the innings at innings plural at Edgbaston in 2019 might all go ahead of it now probably, but still a double ton at that stage of his career was a landmark moment. I looked at his numbers again, or revisited those numbers. I used to love clocking. In the 19 Test matches he played from when he left England in 2013 to this Lord's Test match, well, he was averaging 80 in 35 hits, 80 in 35 hits, massive sample size. All 10 of his Test hundreds came in that window. This was his 10th where he got the double. So that ratio of Test to tons was 53%. And to benchmark that, Bradman's was 56%. So, you know, again, it reminds everyone of just how freakishly gifted Smith was and how consistent that he was at his very, very best. And yeah, he'll be back there in a few weeks' time for the World Final. Made 100 there in his last Test start in 23 against England. All the drama of 2019 when he was taking on Jofra Archer. And it's the beauty of these long careers with these 4-year increments that the Steve Smith career now at Lord's plays out across 15 years from his debut against Pakistan. All the way through.
He'll be back there again in a minute.
That's what I mean. Like it plays out, you know, and again,
right.
He plays there in a couple of weeks. That's 15 years. A decent chance he'll play 2 more years and get to the next Ashes, which will mean there'll be a Smith career that extends to 17 years in all probability. 4 Ashes Test matches, might be 5, mightn't it? Plus the one against Pakistan, plus at least 1 World Test final there. It's a great story of one guy at one ground where he's had such a remarkable roller coaster time of it. And it includes the match there in 2015 where he made his 215, his first double, and that's for Liam Fallon.
And it underlines the freakishness with Bradman as well, that you've got that, like the very, very best of maybe the second best player's very best, which lasts for a few years, and then Bradman does it for 20. The one last little bit with the Smith numbers, just in that period. So he's got the India series before that, where he makes 100 in each of the 4 Test matches, and then the West Indies bit, and then those first couple of tests in England. If you look at the match aggregates rather than the individual innings, this is across a span of 8 Test matches. He goes 214 runs, 161, 206, 188, 30, 253, 66, and 273. So he's got 4 matches in 8 Tests where he's made over 200 in the match, plus a couple more where he's made 160 plus. He's had 2 where he's, relatively speaking, missed out. The lowest of those where he aggregated 30, he was 5 not out in the second innings because they ran out of runs to chase. So probably could have made 100 if they'd had another 150 to run down. And so the only one where he'd actually kind of genuinely missed out-ish was Cardiff, where he made 33 in both innings and 66 for the Test, which would be a pretty good return for most players. They'd be happy with 66 runs in a Test.
Tell me about it.
That run, in 8 matches, he made 1,391 runs, meaning as it stands today, he made 13% of his career runs in 6% of his career tests across that span.
Yeah, outperforming twofold.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Absolutely bizarre.
Hey, Jeff, before we get to our first break today and get to your first number of Storytime 230, our principal partner, as we say, in all of our long episodes and all of the episodes that relate to Australia's Test matches in the World Test Final and, of course, in the Caribbean as well, are for Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. Jeff, we're telling the stories of Maurice Blackburn at the moment through the work that they've done. And as it relates to super insurance, Jason, now, one of his clients, Robbie, was a carpenter who developed MS, which stopped him from working. He had 3 super funds, but none of them told him about his TPD cover. After nearly 2 years of frustration, Robbie came to Maurice Blackburn. Jason took over his case, handled all the paperwork, and secured the 3 claims he was entitled to, totaling several $100,000. This is clearly a life-changing moment for Robbie and his family. And having had Jason working on his behalf for Maurice Blackburn, as it says there, having had years of strife trying to access what was owing to him, this is another reminder of where, when it comes to super insurance, This is a firm that has working people on their side. The legal system is incredibly difficult to navigate. And a lot of the work, the majority of the work that Maurice Blackburn do is on a no-win, no-fee basis. And so much of the work they do is to make sure that you get exactly what you're entitled to. So I enjoyed reading that and thinking to myself, imagine you are in that situation where you are. I say enjoyed, not the circumstances, but it was a reminder of what they're doing. You're developing MS, you can't do your job, and you've got that cover, and you just can't get what you deserved, or what's owing to you, until someone steps in like Maurice Blackburn.
Insurance companies pretty happy to take the money for your premiums, less keen to pay them out. Seems to generally be the trend, and there are a fair few lawyers who would fit that description, but not the ones that we work with. That's the opposite of what they are there to do. So look them up if you need a hand in Australia. They've got offices across the country, Maurice Blackburn. Details in the show notes. We'll be back in a minute.
This is Storytime 230. Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon with you. A quick reminder as we exit the month. It's still Wisden season. Wisden Almanac. You never need to pay full price for Wisden.
Why would you do it?
If you've got the books on your shelf, you should have the books on your shelf. I'm a bit of a, badgery collector these days, but even if you just want to start it, I've got books for every year of my daughter's lives so far, right? So I get 3 each year. You don't think I'm not paying full price? Yes, that's true, because I contribute to the book. I'm kindly giving them, but I wouldn't be paying full price. I'd be a subscriber. The link's in the show notes. It's a piece of cake. You get other discounts as well in relation to other products that Bloomsbury are involved in, who are the publisher of the Wisden Cricketers Almanac. And if you want to go back and hear about this year's edition, it's an absolute belter. Lawrence Booth pulling absolutely no punches on the state of the global game. There's a reason why people pay so much attention to it. I got an email during the week kindly sending me through an extract from the book review that was in there about The Showman, Glenn and my book from last year. And, it means something. It means more that it featured in the Almanac, as it does that you and I got written up as I don't remember the exact words, but basically the best at what we do, the gold standard of what we do in cricket podcasting, and that is because it's the Bible of cricket. But don't pay the full whack, Jeff. Go in there and hit the link and subscribe.
Save the full whack for if you need to hit an intruder with something, make it a Wisden. They're big, they're solid, it's got 1 million words in it, they're heavy, they have weight. That's how much reading material you can get for half the price. Find the link, do yourself a favour. Next number, it's another new pledger. It's Ben McLeod. Welcome to the show. Ben, the number is $3.76. It's in USD. There wasn't a clue attached, and so I took this in the most direct way that I could, Adam.
Okay, I'm just going to get to the right place in the page because I was at the Wisden part of the page a moment ago. Bear with me a moment while we just pad.
That's all right. But there's no clue to read.
I don't need to read. I was going to say if I needed to pad, you know what I'd say to you? I'd say that Sean McGivern, a member of our Nerd Pledge CSI crew, who's been with us since the bloody start, Sean McGivern, he cleaved like 14 minutes off his marathon time the other day.
Did he? Wow.
And he didn't run a marathon till he met us. By that I mean he did the half in year one. Did the full last year and absolutely smashed it on Sunday. So we love Sean. I mentioned on the weekly show that Killian and Anna, his lovely children, ran for the Taverners as well. Seeing Killian running with the Taverners long singlet tied up at the back, wearing his dad's singlet on the Saturday morning was one of those, again, thoroughly heartwarming and special moments. And love having Sean part of our world. So well done to him. Consider us having padded. Over to Ben McLeod, 376, new pledger. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I thought this. I thought Malcolm Marshall took 376 test wickets. USD is sort of Caribbean adjacent. They use a lot of USD on the islands, especially on Barbados, where Malcolm Marshall was from. And it occurred to me, I thought we've made 230 of these. I don't think we've specifically talked about Malcolm Marshall's story, his own story. We've talked about things involving him. Daniel Norcross talked about him just a couple of weeks ago, taking 6 for at Lords and being frightening. But we've talked about him as part of the West Indies pace bowling era. We've mentioned him in he's come up in a range of different tales, but we haven't really talked about him per se, have we? Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and yes. I think you're right. I don't think we've done biographical day in, day out, how he came to be known as one of the greats. We've definitely done Marshall bits, but like you say, it's been within wider stories or trying to focus on individual, events of his. So I think you're entitled to have a fairly good gallop here, Jeff.
Well, and there was also something that because he finished in 1991, that's, I'm of an age where I don't really remember that cricket. That's kind of before my consciousness. And so he's
Yeah.
one of those players who sits, like, I hear his name all the time. I know of him as a figure, but I don't really have a connection with his body of work.
Yeah, I'm just grateful that I got to see him bowl once at the G in 91, that first day of the Southern Stand being opened, when he picked up his forfeit. Now, I don't have, as a 7-year-old or whatever I was, I don't remember it the way that I would now if I were watching it, but I know I was there.
Yeah.
And that sticks out as something special in my early cricket watching life. But you're right. He's just before the point where, people of your and my age can really get their teeth into a cricketer and obsess over them.
And I think in part that's because he dies so young. He's 41 years old when he dies, which is kind of shocking to think about. Even now, that's 1999. So the other players in that scene, obviously we know Michael Holding from commentary. We know Curtly Ambrose from radio comms, Courtney Walsh from coaching. Andy Roberts, Joel Garner did administrative jobs as selectors or team managers or other tasks within West Indies cricket, and even someone like Patrick Patterson, who vanished, had his moment back in the public eye when Bharat did that interview with him, and they're still in contact. So he's somebody who kind of comes up. He's somebody who I hear about. Malcolm Marshall doesn't have the opportunity to do that. He's in the past, and that's where his story is. So it I don't know. It stood out to me that he died the same year as that the Great 2-All series with Australia, and so in some ways, the West Indies were a fading force at that point, but they hadn't declined precipitously. He, in some ways, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, but it seems like a consolation for the terribleness of what happened, that he didn't have to see that. He didn't have to live through the era where they dropped as drastically as they did.
Yeah, and he was grieved so publicly when he passed away. It was in the Australian summer of 99-2000, and I remember on Channel 9 the tributes to him at the time, that it was one of those deaths, in part due to how premature it was, that was felt very deeply and very widely. And even now, when you talk to people that played with or against him, Mark Nicholas, when he was with me last year in the long room, in the writing room, at Lord's, there's such fondness for him in what he did, and what's sometimes not lost in his story, but for that generation of West Indian cricketer, they played full seasons every year in England as well. So it was, they became heroes not only in their own countries, but in their adopted cricketing other homes as well.
Yeah. Yes, and so then I was thinking about his place in the pantheon, the West Indies fast bowler as a concept, and how there are the ones who are more celebrated and the ones less, and looking through the names and where they sit in those eras. You got Roy Gilchrist as your 1950s rep, Wes Hall and Charlie Griffith in the 60s. That point in the 70s, I was looking at some of those matches because of the book project that we're working on, and there's the pace bowling battery idea that's coming through from 1975, but they're not the most celebrated names who are the ones who are part of that initially. You've got Van Burn Holder and Keith Boyce and Wayne Daniel who aren't the big names. And then it's that late 70s bit into the 80s where you start, that major name era starts, where you've got Andy Roberts, you've got Michael Holding, Joel Garner, Malcolm Marshall, Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh are the biggest ones. They're the real marquee. And then there are the others who are switching in and around them when some of those players aren't available, that kind of thing. Colin Croft probably straddles those two groups, I suppose. And then the others who are more occasional appearances, like Sylvester Clarke or Patrick Patterson, Winston Davis, Winston Benjamin. And then you come through into the 90s and you've got the players who are still playing with Curtly and Courtney, but you've got that next generation who don't quite have the same aura, but they're still able to fill that gap somewhere, like Ian Bishop or like Kenny Benjamin. And then the ones who are a little less have less of that presence. Franklin Rose, Rion King, Cameron Cuffey, Nixon McLean, those kind of players.
Otis Gibson, Nixon McLean were the two that came out to Australia in 96, 97, and they were the supporting cast to the big two. And you're right. There was a sense that the generation that immediately followed, it didn't take long before it fell away, and the aura dimmed.
Right, and it might have been to do with the company they were in as well. Maybe if Vasbert Drakes was bowling in 1982, he might have been a world beater with the company around him. Sure. Who knows? The new Millennium battery, you've got Jermaine Lawson, Jerome Taylor, who did knock over Steve Smith. I just checked that.
Good.
The impulse was right. Fidel Edwards, Tino Best, Pedro Collins, Merv Dillon, and then you move on to the contemporary lot, Jaden Seals, who's got a bloody good record for what he's done so far, 70-odd wickets at bugger all. Elzari Joseph, Shannon Gabriel, surprisingly high on the all-time West Indies wicket-taking list. Jason Holder, Kemar Roach, who's still going around, he's 16 wickets away from 300, Kemar. Hope he gets there against Australia.
Yeah, we did it in we did this in the interview with him recently. In order to get to 100 test matches, it's unfortunately going to take 2 cycles of the WTC, and that seems less likely, but the next milestone of 300 wickets is more achievable. So he said he's very open about the fact that he's got some statistical goals still left with him as a test cricketer. And I think, yeah, the first one's clearly 300, and the stretch goal is 2 more years of test cricket and be a 100 test capped player for the Windies. Yeah. I'd love to see him do both.
And I like that. I think there are players who say, that doesn't matter, but I think it's good for that to matter. It's good for that to give you an incentive to want to keep being at the best. But the reason I was going back through looking at all these players and thinking about them and considering their careers is that when you put it all together pound for pound, you go, Malcolm Marshall probably is the best of all of them. Like, he's like 376 wickets, slightly fewer than Kirtley, who was 405, and a long way behind Courtney Walsh, who was 519. He took them faster, so 4.6 wickets per test. Ambrose is 4.1, Walsh is 3.9. So he was more able to dominate, even though he was playing in an era when so many other bowlers were taking wickets. The average of 20.94 is insane. Curtly Ambrose is almost as good. Courtney Walsh is 3.5, 4 runs adrift to that. And I don't know. It's obviously hard to assess quality, but the average was the best out of all bowlers in the 200 club. It was the best until Bumrah got into the 200 club at 19, and Bumrah's average could still blow out over the rest of his career. Only take a couple of bad tests and it'd be higher than Marshall's. So, there's who knows what's going to happen for Bumrah from now on. So just absurd numbers. And the things when you're looking at the Malcolm Marshall story that stand out the most, one is the height, or the lack of height, being under 6 foot, which means it's, because of the pace, I think it's harder for batters to pick up lateral movement of the ball to some degree. It's coming at them flatter, it's skidding onto them. And, if you're facing Joel Garner and it's anywhere short of full, then presumably it's easier to try to get under that ball than the Malcolm Marshall one, which you wouldn't be able to tell if it was coming at you or not. And that's why he hit a lot of players, smashed Mike Gatting in the nose. And the story that Daniel mentioned about Andy Lloyd, the opener, getting hit in the head half an hour into his test career and having to retire hurt and didn't play again, which is a story we told a few years ago in some serious detail. So there's that aspect. There's the intimidatory bowler, but then there's the aspect of being the complete fast bowler. And when you read the reports about him, the descriptions of him, it's that he has everything. Like, there's serious pace, there's that like whip of the arm that makes the ball come out at incredible velocity, but then there are all of the skills. There's the in-swinger, there's the out-swinger, there's relentless accuracy, there's a leg cutter, which you don't tend to see bowled a lot these days. The deck's away from the right-hander. There was one that gets Jeff Marsh out that I was watching back that just moves away from him so nicely and takes the outside edge at the SCG in 1988-89, I think. And then the third part is this attitude of hostility that is not just about short-pitched bowling. It's like every delivery that he bowls seems to have this hostility. I spent probably 2 hours just watching Malcolm Marshall clips preparing this, because he was mesmerising, because he comes in from mid-off basically, but he doesn't come in on that curved run like you see some of the older style bowlers too. He's coming in on this dead straight line on the angle and absolutely belting in, like the legs are pumping, and he sprints into the delivery stride. He doesn't do that kind of arrive and prop and do the windmill thing that some bowlers do. He like jumps into that delivery stride and then the arm comes over so fast you can hardly see it. And the pace is frightening at times. It was like that Archer spell at Lords, the way that the ball leaps at players and you see them trying to get out of the way even from a fuller length. So he's just unbelievable to watch. And I could see, like, I hadn't sat down and watched Malcolm Marshall before, I've got to be honest, really. Like, I've seen bits and pieces, but I hadn't concentrated on it. after an hour of that, I'm like, this is why people are still so obsessed with this guy, and this is why they keep talking about him in the way they do.
Yeah, I think that's well summed up, and it was the skill more than the sheer pace. Like, he had the sheer pace, but you watch back and there's reasons why centuries made against him are graded on a different scale. So the Magooch 91 on a sort of a P Super, when he was in a P Super rather, when he was able to deal with Marshall both ways and all the other wider complexity. There's footage of Marshall bowling in New Zealand in 1984, the year when he picked up most wickets in a calendar year. I don't remember how many it was, but it was a shitload. When watching the ball dart around there, and I mean, the degree of difficulty of getting through a Marshall spell was so high that, well, that's why so few people did it. And then being able to use the county championship as the finishing ground, or the finishing school rather, where he bowled within himself, as they had to. They're playing back-to-back 3-day games every week and a Sunday league game. You needed to learn how to do the skill bit and not worry quite so much about the pace thing. Sure, you could shift into fourth or fifth gear when you needed to, when the game required it, but most of the time you were bowling, a term you don't hear anymore, to bowl within oneself. And it wasn't a derogatory thing. It was an idea of maintaining your body across a long season and your skill taking over away from brute strength. You see it in club cricket, but you would never now see it in international cricket, because the speed radar would see you cancelled in the way that Ollie Robinson's now been cast aside because he bowled one spell in the 70s in India a couple of years ago when he was injured, which he never should have done. So there are extra complexities now, or added complexity now. But back then, that's where Marshall was able to provide a serious point of difference in being the most skillful bowler in the world, along with being one of the most dangerous when he needed to do that particular thing.
This is the interesting thing as well, the idea of county cricket being the finishing school, because what I liked about learning about his story is that he takes his time to get going. He's not brilliant from the beginning, which is, it's relatable. So he's from Bridgetown. His dad's a cop, dies in a road accident when Malcolm's very young. He's still a baby, so never knew his father. His mother married again, he has a bunch of half siblings, and his granddad was the main cricket influence in his life, apparently. So he gets into first class cricket young, and he takes 6 for on debut for Barbados against Jamaica and goes straight into the test team because it's World Series cricket and nobody's available. But that's this little bump at the start, and then everything's very low key after that. So he tours India, does well in some of the tour games, does bugger all in the test matches, battles. That's 1978, gets left out for a couple more years, doesn't play again until 1980 in England. And even then does okay, doesn't dominate, takes a few wickets, but he's not at all looking like a prodigious bowler at that point. Tours Pakistan, does okay, doesn't do great. Like, none of the numbers are exciting at this point. Plays for Hampshire for 3 seasons from starting in 79, and again, does okay. First season, 40-odd wickets. And he's economical. He takes them at 22, but he's not hauling in big bags. The next season, the economy is great. He takes 60-odd wickets at 17 and then another 60-odd at 19. So he's doing well, but he's not kind of the revelation of the land. So he's had 3 full county seasons and a few West Indies tours before, which is basically 4 years of preparation before it explodes. It's the old overnight success that took years in the making. And it's 1982 when it goes crazy. 134 wickets in the English season at 15, which not many people took anywhere near that many. Not many took over 100 in that era, let alone doing it at that kind of economy rate. So up until this season, he'd played 96 first-class matches and he'd taken 5 in an innings 20 times in those 90 games. In the next season alone, he played 22 matches and did it 12 times. So he's, suddenly everything was working for him. Into early 1983, gets his first 5-wicket bag in a test match, Port of Spain against India. So it was his 14th test before he got a 5-wicket haul.
Yeah, right.
So this is interesting. It takes him some time, some significant time to get into it and get going. Later in his career, he has a streak of something like 11 fifers in like 13 test matches or something like that. But, it doesn't happen immediately. It didn't Rachel Hunter, or it did Rachel Hunter. It didn't happen overnight. but it did happen. So he gets going from that kind of 83 point, goes to India, takes 9 in Kolkata, takes 5 in the innings in Chennai, beats up Australia in Barbados and Jamaica in 1984, and then goes to England for the Blackwash series in the middle of 1984. What I really liked is that he said, sorry, Hampshire, not available this year. I have to fuck up England. This is what I'm here to do. I don't want to be distracted by county duty. So he plays the next season, but he takes this season off to play England. And, of course, they take England down 5-0 in the series that Daniel was talking about. So 6 for at Lords, 7 for 53 at Leeds, 5 for at the Oval, 24 wickets at 18 in the series. The 7-wicket bag is the game where he breaks his thumb while he's fielding and then comes out to bat with one arm in plaster. Not like Colin Cowdrey, actually had to do some batting. And then
did it with one hand, made 23, I reckon. I think 23 stands out. He hit a couple of boundaries through the offside, playing with just his bottom hand, then went out and bowled in the cast. I think he opened the bowl in the cast afterwards.
Yeah. So he takes his 7 for 53 with the left arm in a cast, which is wild. Yeah. So right arm could bowl, left arm doesn't matter. So, tough as old boots. That's the first in a series at 5 in a row where he averages under 20 in a series, 5 consecutive series averaging like between 17 and 19. In those 5 series, he takes 122 wickets at 18.
Yeah.
Which is just absurd. A couple of England series, couple of Australia series, and a New Zealand one. Comes back to Hampshire in 1985, takes 95 more wickets at 17, and then 100 at 15 the following season. So, like, the whole 80s just belonged to Malcolm Marshall, and he's all over it. He swarms pretty much every side that he plays through the 80s. And it's basically the 80s. He has that little flirtation in 1978, and he goes on until 91, so sort of just past the end of the decade. But it's pretty much that decade. It's not a huge career. It's 81 test matches all up. Even near the end when, the returns aren't as big, he's not taking 5 or 6, but he's taking 1, 2 or 3 wickets all the time. His final 18 innings in test cricket, he takes at least 1 wicket.
Right.
So, he's not falling away. And it is a little surprising in some ways that he's kind of, sort of made to make way at a time when West Indies resources aren't necessarily improving. But he finishes up at the 92 World Cup. That's his last competitive West Indies international. Plays a couple of seasons in South African domestic cricket, which is a bit odd, but is a mentor for a very young Sean Pollock there, and was apparently really influential on his career. And the bit that did my head in when I looked at it, all of those series through the 80s. So he plays 21 series, test series this is, for West Indies all up. A lot of one-day cricket as well. The first series in India, 78, 79. They play 6 tests. They draw 5 of them. They lose 1, West Indies, with a pretty weak team. They've got Alvin Greenidge, not Gordon Greenidge. They've got Fallon Bacchus, who we've talked about before, Norbert Phillip, these kind of players. They still managed to only just lose the series 1-0 across 6 tests. They lose that series. That is the only test series that Malcolm Marshall lost with West Indies. He never lost again.
Love it.
At a few drawn series, but never lost a series for the rest of his career. And then that sad finish, he got cancer, which took him very, very quickly, a few months really, but 5 months probably between the diagnosis and his eventual death. He married his longtime partner shortly, about a month before he died, and managed to get back to Barbados before the end. It still seems, impossibly sad that such a huge figure isn't someone who's hanging around, who's part of the landscape that we're in at the moment, being a disgruntled elder statesman of West Indies cricket, cracking the shits at whatever the team is doing, who's playing T20 cricket too much and who doesn't care enough about the badge. And, I wish he was here to get disgruntled with whatever is happening now.
Yeah, indeed. That's a lovely telling of the story of Malcolm Marshall for Ben McLeod. Welcome to the Crew 376, a new patron. A reminder that anyone can join our Patreon page and support what we do. We talked about our commercial partners earlier. Well, it's the patron subscribers that have been with us longest and most loyally since 2019. We've always had such a deep bank of support there. So that Discord channel, that wider community, continuing the theme of the marathon chat during the week. Matt Blacker, who was been central to that community across a number of years now, having run a 3-hour marathon a couple of years ago with us. He wasn't able to get to Edinburgh in the end, but boy, has he played a role in underpinning so many personal bests with his one-on-one coaching, with his group coaching, with his nutrition advice. He's been extraordinary for me and many others. And I just wanted to acknowledge Matt as one of our great members on Discord, and kind of summing up everything that we've been talking about on the pod this week about our community and about how that cascades into raising money for the tabs and everything else. That's why we're so proud of it. Patreon.com/the final word to join up with us on Discord. Jeff, before we go to our second and final break today, expats everywhere on the weekend, expats everywhere in our world, and Odin Mortgage and Tax is where expats can make sure that they are well supported in the event that they are thinking about going back to Australia, or if they've got a property in Australia, which they want to keep tabs on when they're living elsewhere, or if they need to manage tax affairs in two separate countries. You're an expat. I'm an expat. We know many people who will likely return to Australia one day, or indeed will continue to have a financial stake in Australia in one form or another. You do not want to be doing this on the hoof. That is a very, very bad place to be. And that's why I was attracted to Odin to work with us, because they are doing something and providing a service, as they have for 2,000 people now in 40 countries, which aligns so neatly with the types of people who listen to the final word.
They may also be providing some surfers, but they're probably providing a service to some surfers, because a lot of Australians head to other places, to Portugal, for instance, to go surfing, where it seems like anyone I speak to who finds that I'm Australian assumes that I am in fact here to go surfing. I am not here to go surfing. I do not know how. I will die. I am afraid of it. I would like to go to Nazaré at some point and look at the big fucking scary waves, but I don't want to be near them. I would like to look at them from land. That's as close as I want to get. Odin Mortgage and Tax. If you are anywhere else, if you are living elsewhere, they are the people to help you if you're Australian and you need assistance within the Australian tax code. That's it.
That's it. Click the link in the show notes. That sends you to a page that lets them know that we've sent you, which, that's what helps that particular relationship move. Speaking of surfing, Jeff, got a sec. We can say one more thing about surfing before we go to the break. Surfing the net, man. Surfing the net. We're talking expats. We're talking living abroad. We're talking. There's been a Four Corners episode made about the Liberal Party's election loss. I gather it's not very good, but okay. I'm still going to watch it with my NordVPN, because that's the type of thing that I watch. NordVPN.com/TFW. That is the way in which you can keep watching and listening to the things that you want to watch and listen to.
Is that as someone not in Australia, the internet might say, you can't watch this because you're not in Australia. But then you say, what if I press this button on my VPN and, hey, presto, as far as the internet knows, I am in Australia. Exactly. It disguises your location. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Wherever Carmen Sandiego sets her NordVPN to, she is there as far as the internet knows. This is the subterfuge of our age. If you want to buy a live goat from Azerbaijan and the prices are cheaper within Azerbaijan than outside Azerbaijan, you log in as someone in Azerbaijan and you do your purchase order there. If you're buying a flight from one country to another country and it's cheaper this way than that way because you're getting screwed on the conversion rate, you log in from the other country. This is what VPNs do. They're magic. They're beautiful. They allow me to watch the full match replays of Cats games when I'm not able to watch them in Australia. Don't tell anyone that. They'll probably find a way to stop that happening. If I say that, just keep that between you and me. But that is possible sometimes. Sometimes.
Yes, I've used it to watch various sporting events around the world, TV shows and all the rest. So NordVPN.com/TFW, massive discount, months off. And, we're coming into that time of year when people in the UK, it's half term right now. I didn't know what half term was till I had kids. I
still don't, and I never will. I refuse.
Why is there a week holiday in the middle of the term? I don't understand.
You know what something with a week holiday in it is? That's the end of a term. If you have a holiday, hot tip, holiday, end of term. That's how you work it out. The
one wrinkle here is there are 3 terms here, not 4 for school.
Doesn't matter.
Which means that,
there are 6 terms. England, you're wrong. There are 6 terms. I'm sorry. You are wrong.
The reason I
As
say
usual.
that is that people will be going on holiday, and it's nearly Father's Day here as well. Nearly Father's Day, so you can.
If you've had a holiday and you come back, it's not the same term.
You can buy your dad or someone else in your life. I don't know why I said the Father's Day thing, but I'm getting marketed to in my algorithm.
Don't
Father's
buy
Day
some socks.
buy them a NordVPN account.
Don't buy a shitty cut. And you know what? Depending what age you are, your dad. I mean, certainly if you're our age, your dad has bugger all chance of knowing what a VPN is, but might find one useful. These are very simple to use.
Yes,
They're the most idiot-proof things. You just open it and press the country on the map that you want to be in. Done.
NordVPN.com/TFW.
Story time at 230. It is the final word. We've got a couple of numbers to go. We're going to get the foot down and get this done. Oliver Jawara. New pledger. Bless you, Oliver, and all who sail within you. £2.51, 2.51. Should be an easy get, says Oliver, except that it isn't the final number of said feat. The 251 is what I witnessed in person, but without any other info, it is possible to link my 251 with the actual number, which would make it super obvious.
Yep, it does. It didn't take long, Oliver. Thank you for joining up and being part of our community. 251 knot was what Michael Clarke was on at Stumps Day 2 when he went on to make 329 knot.
Lovely.
So, spoiler, that's what we're going to be talking about. Right in the
329 would have been fairly obvious, but it could also have been Inzamam al-Haq, Oliver. You might have been a big Inzi fan. He made that, didn't he?
I'm not sure if there are any other 251s. I didn't even look because I
know 329.
No, I know that. I know the 329, but I'm not sure if 251 could have related to another triple ton. It's possible. It's possible someone else was overnight 251 before they reached 300, but you know what? I don't care. I know this is going to be Michael Clarke, so that's what I'm going to go on with. I talked about purple patches with Smith before and so on. Like Clarke's purple patch was pretty dark as well. He was in the middle of this. Don't know why it's called the purple patch dark, but
I don't know. I don't know either. Is it to do with like royalty, like purple being a royal color?
Yeah.
So purple used to be the most expensive dye that you could get because it was the hardest to make. So that's why the kings and whatever always had purple because it proved they were rich. It's like before stretch Hummers, it was how you. It was the medieval version of a stretch Hummer.
And I'd imagine that, it's something regal about it. The Purple Heart as well, But
that's why purple has the regal association, purely because it was the most expensive shit you could get, and they were showing off. Typical nobility bullshit. This is why you shouldn't have royals destroy the feudal state.
It's a good colour, though. I do like purple. I like my oranges. I like my purples.
Yeah.
As Winnie knows.
Well, it doesn't mean anything now because, dyes are synthetic and they're equally, they cost the same. So that's why royal families are so sad because any ordinary street-dwelling scum like us can buy a purple shirt.
40% of test matches in that purple patch, Clarke got 100. So I mentioned the Smith and the Bradman bit. When Clarke was absolutely flying, it was 40% across a 30-test stretch that took him up to test match number 100. So, that gives a feeling for how the extent to which he dominated after becoming captain. And this is right in the teeth of that. Or maybe it's the start of it, depending on how you interpret the run. So Clarke did get a century earlier that summer against New Zealand, which was his first home summer in charge after the one test in 2011, which we'll come to in a sec. And this is it's worth putting this in the context as well. This is the first summer after the Argus review and when Pat Howard comes in, and there are a raft of changes up top. Structurally.
Well, then thank God for that because that panned out really well.
I think the point I'm making is it's an interesting time in like the modern history of Australian cricket. And look, Dan Brettig's book Whitewash to Whitewash does a terrific job of documenting this. That where Australian cricket went between 07, 08 and 13, 14, there's this weird bit in the middle, and Clarke kind of navigates Australia both into it and then out of it again. So, that's the point that I was kind of trying to make there, that this is the bit when they are trying to make Australian cricket more sustainable. The Big Bash starts not long after this. They see participation levels going down. It's not directly related, but it's kind of related. The the review that went into the board and the composition of the board and trying to shake up the way that it was a little bit of an old boys club with 2 appointees from the big states and 1 from the small states, and like changing the configuration of that in favour of independent directors. I'm not saying that independent directors are a cure-all, by the way, and I'm not saying that changing the representative model has ended up being a good thing overall, just simply that this is the time when those types of changes and that type of thinking was starting to dominate after Australia lost the Ashes in 10-11. So with that all in mind, and this is kind of in some ways the last India series when they come out to Oz and their bowling doesn't look quite right, their fast bowling. I mean, Zahir Khan right towards the end, Ishant Sharma on his second trip to Australia, bowling quickly, but less effective, far less effective than they would be when they would return in subsequent trips, especially thinking about two tours on when they rocked up in 18-19 with
it's my defining memory of that innings is just how toothless Ishant Sharma looked. I don't know why, because there were times when he looked great, but in that series there was just nothing there. It was just sitting up on a nice tall length and you could just play it off the top of the length.
So let's speed up into the game. India all out 191. I really like this Australian bowling group. James Pattinson 4-for. Ben Hilfenhaus, 3-for. Peter Siddle, 3-for. They took all 10 between them. A very likeable attack. They had their time. Nathan Lyon, of course, was in there as well, the great era spanner that he is, still going strong. And it's worth remembering that Australia did lose 3 early wickets. They were 38 for 3 when Clarke walked in. So, there was work to do late on day one. And he's naked.
Pretty much what they were when Joe Burns and Travis Head did that thing in Canberra. They were 30 for 3.
It's about right. Yeah, it's about right. But that naked bat that Clarke was using at the time, the sponsorless blade, he must have been like us, rattling the tin for commercial partners at the time and had the bat blank as the canvas. And boy, did he use it well? Did he use it well? Driving Ishant Sharma for 4 to bring up the first of the 100. So sweet, that timing. His 18th Test century, doing it at home. And I think this is a really important point in this story. I was there in early 2011. This is the first week of 2012 when he's playing against India. The first week of 2011, that Test match when he captained in Ponting's absence, people sometimes debate this point. He was booed that day. I heard it with my own ears. Now, I know that to make a boo sound loud, it doesn't require a majority of people in the ground. It could have been 50 people in the ground. But the point is that at that exact moment when he became the Aussie captain, when he was taking over from Ponting, to say the jury was out on Michael Clarke would be a massive understatement. The fact that the board, the Cricket Australia board that I referred to before, as again talked about in Whitewash to Whitewash, they looked at other candidates in a rather desperate attempt to overlook Michael Clarke. Remember, Cam White nearly became the Aussie captain through that process, that quite dramatic board meeting. Kind of goes to all this idea that Clarke's reputation was sullied for a number of reasons, some fair, some not fair in my view. But here, the great cure-all is being a guy that makes runs. And he suddenly became an absolute machine at that. So, a nice part of this is listening to the crowd. Another nice part is listening to the commentary. It's the last Sydney Test match that Tony Greig is commentating on. Very sadly, he passed away during the Sydney Test match of 2013. He died just after that, I think. It might have been the week of or the week after. So, Tony Greig, the last time in his adopted home city that he be on the tools there and does a great job of narrating much of this, as does Mark Nicholas, friend of the pod. Oh, you little beauty. The Sydney cricket ground becomes Michael Clarke's kingdom for a day when Clarke gets to
purple.
200.
It's wearing purple.
Very, very, indeed, very Mark Nicholas, the kingdom for a day. And by this point, by the time he reaches 200, Clarke's wearing like his 4th different outfit. He's wearing a long sleeve shirt with a helmet. He was wearing the baggy green with a short sleeve shirt earlier in the day. And the other thing about that long innings is the first significant chunk of it, he was the understudy because all eyes were on Ricky Ponting. Ponting had lived on 39 Test tons for seemingly an eternity. And he gets to the 40th and finally reaches that extraordinary milestone. Clarke's making runs, and it's significant in the context of the game. But the Australian public were so fixated on Ponting getting to Test match ton number 40. Of course, he would get his 41st the following week in Adelaide as well, and that'd be the end of his career centuries for the great former Australian captain by that point. And then the second half of the innings, he's batting with Mike Hussey, who goes on to make an unbeaten 150. So he had so much time out there in the middle And then India are well into their rotations by late in day 2. Many of the boundaries in the highlights package, you can see that massive bald spot on Sehwag's head as he's been clouted time and time again, which I noted on the commentary. And that includes bringing up his 250 off Sehwag to complete the second day. So one last chance for the Sydney crowd to love Michael Clarke. He's 251 not out at stumps, the number we're looking for. There's Bob Hawke sculling a beer in the crowd. Story about Hawkey. He was told to stop doing that a number of years before. And the problem with Hawkey was that he was so well known for it. I've been to many, many Labor fundraisers where like everybody knew he wasn't meant to do it, and he would do it. He would sing Solidarity Forever, and then he would scull a beer because that's just what he would do. Well, he did it this day at the SCG. My great mate, Brett Collett, who's been terrific supporter of ours in various ways. He was there in the stands with Hawkey when he was sculling the beer. He's like, this is fucking ridiculous. Watching a bloke who's in his 80s still such such expectation that he would just do these things.
Yeah.
And so
you gotta be true to yourself sometimes. You can die on your feet or you can live on your knees. If you're Bob Hawke, do you want to live a longer period of time while not being the guy who nails plastic schooners of shitty mid-strength at a bad temperature at a sporting ground? Do you want to? What is that? How many more years is that worth? Is it worth more years at that stage in life? You got to do what makes you happy.
You're probably right. And given he was always known for breaking the yard glass record at Oxford all those years before, it just went around with him, didn't it? It was who he was.
One of the first things we tried to do, Cam Fink and I, in 2013, when we went to England to cover the Ashes, we went to Oxford, I think might have even been before the first test, between the first and the second at least. And we went and found that pub and we tried to find a yard glass. We went around the whole of Oxford trying to find a pub that still had one. None of them had one. Tried to find where we could buy one from some sort of curiosity shop. Nothing available. Like, there is a gap in the market there. Australians will buy a yard glass in Oxford if you're listening to this. So eventually we just figured out the volume, that it was 2.5 pints. And so we decided, we had a friend of ours there in a Kubra and a Bluey as well. So he and I decided to see how fast we could do 2.5 pints of freezing cold Foster's. Horrible idea. Really bad idea. The temperature is all wrong. The ice cream headache starts coming in like halfway through the first one. It was, I think Bob Hawke did it in 11 seconds. I think it took us about 111 seconds.
But isn't the thing that this is the great argument for drinking pump ale? Because you can scull pump
ale. It's at the temperature.
And he did. This was it. So it was the 11 seconds, but he wasn't sculling, the equivalent
frosty,
of fizzy Fosters. The stuff.
That was a horrible idea. But there's Cam has some footage somewhere of Nick and I doing this, and then there's like a 10-second pause, and then I immediately run down a staircase into a bathroom and throw it all up again. And Cam's got the camera underneath the door filming this. It is probably the least classy thing that I've done professionally, and that's saying something. Because we were trying to shoot a funny video, but we're like, we can't use any of that. All of that is bad.
It is rubbish. Yeah, it was a Turf Tavern where he did it in Oxford. But it's like, as it always is with Hawke, multiple pubs he cited over the years that he said he'd done that, and the legends of Bob Hawke, just like, who knows? He might have done it at the Turf Tavern. He might have done it at 25 pubs.
The Turf had a thing out in the back garden claiming it was them, but they're the ones with the ceiling that's about 5 foot tall. So I had to drink a pint out of a straw in that place because my head was bent over sideways.
One of the reasons why I always you find it weird that Australians get funny about the warmer beer over here. I'm addicted to that stuff. I bloody love the warmer beer. Always have. Always will. Right, so where are we? So Hawkeye sculling on day 2. Into day 3, moving beyond the great people pleaser. I was returning from Berlin, where I'd been across New Year's, and I was tracking every run on the way back from Heathrow. Got home in the 290s to where I was in Mile End at the time, and I remember that was when he was passing the highest SCG score. Another glorious cover drive. That's right, the 287 went past Clarke. And they keep shooting to Clarke's, I guess, the family box, but there's just, I'm not sure if it's his girlfriend or wife or partner at the time. I know he's obviously had a lot of different girlfriend, wives, partners at different intervals. I don't really keep up with it, but she gets a lot of airtime as he proceeds towards 300. Another stunning drive, an on drive to get to 299. Then Ishan gives him the chance to clip through mid-wicket for 4 to go to 300. Appropriately, it's Tubby Taylor on comms who made a triple of his own. And Clarke really goes for it. He throws his bat away and really takes off in celebration. And again, coming back to that earlier point about the way the Australian public did really turn the other way for Michael Clarke through this stretch of time. And yeah, he kept going, and it felt like he was going to haul down 334. He ended up pulling out on 329 when Australia was 659 for 4 declared, when Huss reached his 150, which was a nice moment. And there's this
that's bullshit. I got to say that's bullshit. Declaring it through, come on, like a 150 is important, but like breaking one of those long-standing records in Australian cricket's not important.
I'm sure
I don't care about 329.
Yeah, I'm sure he was asked about it at the time, and I don't think he gave a particularly convincing answer either way.
No.
Like it's you wouldn't want to say it's possible he didn't know. He would have known. How could he not know 334? But yeah, I don't know.
But it's still possible he didn't. I mean, some cricketers don't pay attention to this stuff.
It's too an important a number for an Aussie cricketer not to know, I would think. And he would have been told it. He would have consumed it. I mean, we know
he would have seen Hayden break it only a few years earlier. Yeah, he would, like, surely he's paying attention when Matthew Hayden makes 380, and it's a big deal.
No, he would have known. And also, when he was getting, he would have woken up that day on 251, knowing that 300's within striking distance, and there would have been.
I just think it's too cute. I think it's too cute to be that close to it and not see if you can do it. I think you have an obligation. It's like going easy on the other team so it's more competitive or whatever it is. Like you're manipulating the game at that point. Your job is to go out and try to make as many runs as you can.
Well, I suppose they would have viewed the fact that they rolled India for 180 and at that point was 659 for 40.
Yeah, so they had heaps of time. So he could have taken 2 more overs.
So you are far more strident about this stuff than me. I love records as much as the next guy, but your thing about needing to break them is, I think your thinking might be a little bit different to the types who they wouldn't have clocked.
I mean, it's more of an affectation. It's more manufactured, and it's more egotistical to say I'm going to pull out just before I get the chance to break this record.
But that presupposes that he's doing it for that reason. That presupposes that he's saying I'm for affect, pulling out on 329. You're discounting the fact that he's like, oh, Huss is 150. Oh, that works. That's fine. We'll get out and bowl. Which is by that point. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We got answers to get through here. So So the last thing I wanted to say about this, them walking from the field, there is something to be said for this. The departure of the field in front of a packed SCG with both of them not out, Huss having reached a milestone, Clarke 320, that is like boys' own stuff. The way they walk off and both of them give it to all 4 points and they take their time, and it is utterly glorious. Like it's I'm sure for both of them, it's a moment that they will treasure forever, and getting to walk off on their own terms together, which is not unrelated to, I suppose, the way in which they chose to declare. Jeff, a quick moment of indulgence before I give you the baton back. I just wanted to tell you something I spotted on Twitter today, completely unrelated, and I thought I'd give it as a bonus here to Oliver, who's our new pledger. So bear with me here. David Griffin, who's the great Derbyshire historian, writer, photographer, put on Twitter this morning that on this day, the 27th of May in 1901, a chap by the name of Sidney Evershed scored a century on debut, not on debut, far from it, on the contrary, before lunch for Derbyshire against Hampshire at Southampton. Now, century in a session before lunch, pretty cool, unusual, not unusual enough for me to raise it. It was his final first class game. And I'm like, I need to know what the fuck's going on here. So there's a few bits you'll love here, Jeff. He became Sir Sidney Evershed later. I'll tell you why when we get into the answer. Had a big mustache. Played from 1880. Was captain of Derbyshire from 1891 to 1898. He was the son of a member of Parliament. He actually played for Derbyshire when they lost first-class status in 1887 and regained it in 1894 when they joined the county championship, when that got drawn back to a fewer teams in 1890. An up-and-down career, and so it goes. Played 129 innings and averaged 25 with 4 centuries. Averaged 24 with the ball. You'll like this, Jeff. 5 for 19 were his best figures in first-class cricket against MCC. Look a bit closer. They were his only wickets in first-class cricket. He played for 19 years.
That's
and good. 21 years of first-class cricket, and his only wickets came in a fifer at Lords against MCC in 1883. So there's very little to go on.
I've got very posh. Like surely someone owed him money or something. He had a stake in a Kimberley gold mine riding on it.
Well, he was only young at the time, so I don't know whether it was that. It's one of those quirks of the game. No Crick Info profile to go on, so I've got not much more to add other than He played one game in 1900 against London County, where Grace was playing. He got runs, of course. And 1 year on, the game on this day in 1901 at the county ground, they won the toss and batted, got his century. He was 100 not out even at lunch. He ended up getting 123 as a 40-year-old. Hampshire ended up winning this classic by 2 wickets, a chase in the final innings. But that's him done. So he's played his final game of first-class cricket. He's made a century in a session before lunch and said, fuck that. We've lost the game. Century in a session. I am done. So I just thought the brief telling of the story of Sydney Evershed, given we're recording on the 27th of May, was a worthwhile one. And he was knighted later in life for services to Burton-on-Trent, having been the president of Derbyshire and having been the chair of the local infirmary. So there you go. The brief story there to wind out the answer that was otherwise about Michael Clarke, and when he was 251 not out for Oliver Jawara.
Very good. Thank you for that. And a little digression way back in time, given that it's had a very contemporary Australian feel today, and it will continue to with my last answer. We've had Steve Smith, we've had Michael Clarke. Alex Brown is our final pledger, and he has been waiting a long time for us to solve this pledge. It was $8.54. It was in New Zealand dollars, I think, initially. And Alex said...
so he's left this for you, and he says the clue is, for Jeff, it's not about New Zealand for a change, bearing in mind that we've done multiple answers for Alex, who's been a great pal over here. I look forward to catching up with him through the summer, but about his favourite non-New Zealand player. So Alex, here's Jeff for you as requested.
Okay, so all of Alex's previous pledges have been about New Zealand players. He lives in the UK, but is a very proud and loud New Zealander. And favourite player is in inverted commas. And this did seem like a very early and clear indication, because Alex is on the chat page, the Discord page, and is inclined to leave commentary particularly about one David Warner, who... I'm just going to say he doesn't have the most flattering opinion of. That would seem to be something that could sum up the last few years of Warner-related content. So surely favourite player has to be about Warner, because it's borderline obsessive, Alex, the David Warner stuff. But solving this took months. So it's one of these ones where I knew what it was about, and Alex knew I was trying to figure it out. And, there were a couple of nudges here and there, but it wasn't explicitly clear, but I didn't want to give up. I was like, you're not going to get the satisfaction of making me ask you what the answer is here. I'm going to figure this out. Talk to the sleuth group, the detectives, a bunch of times. Everybody went back and forth on various options. We looked at everything. Now, 854, the number. I was thinking 95 runs in the 2019 Ashes. Was there something to do with when he got to 85 runs and hit a 4? Or was it something like, was it a series where he'd gone badly? Was there a number I could relate to it? Was it like a slow strike rate in a T20 innings? Eventually, Alex said, don't think about runs, think about time. So we looked at all kinds of things about time, mostly to do with spans of time between milestones. How long had it been between hundreds or between away hundreds? Was there like 8 years and 54 days or 8 months and something like that? I sliced and diced David Warner's career in so many directions, trying to find something that linked to this 854, and nothing did. Nothing in the stats. It was driving me fucking crazy, Adam. I have to tell you, but I couldn't give up. And finally, I don't exactly know how this happened. I just kept going back. I just kept looking for things and looking up things, and suddenly, completely by accident, as I was trawling through a few historical archives, something sprung out. And I'd always had this feeling it might be to do with this, but I couldn't figure out how to link it. Cricinfo have a video on YouTube. They have a YouTube channel, and one of their videos from 2018 is David Warner's apology press conference. It runs to a duration of 8 minutes and 54 seconds. It is 8:54, and I haven't confirmed this with Alex, but surely it has to be it. So this works. What would Alex like to see about David Warner? Probably the bit of David Warner's life that he enjoyed the least. So I think the first thing Alex needs to know is that the 8-minute 54 version is edited down. So it takes out some of the longer pauses and hesitations. So if you really want to enjoy the full,
takes out some of the blatant faking in the. Hang on, we'll come back to this, I'm sure.
We'll work our way up.
Comes back to the bits where Warner is trying to make himself cry. We'll get to that. Sorry, I'll give you my strong view in a moment.
Okay, so if you have the full thing with the full weight between the answers with the squirming and whatnot, that's 11 minutes and 9 seconds. You can find that. I think ITV have that on their channel. Alex, if you want to, you can
NordVPN
hop in the bath. Yeah, NordVPN in, run yourself a bath, put some music on, put some roses in a vase next to it, and get the old Dr. Bronners and see what you can do with your afternoon. Now, I hadn't watched this back since I wrote the book, Adam. Obviously, I watched it at the time, but it was instructive to look at this again. Body language, like it's obviously all been very, very well prepared. Come in with your head bowed, look sort of physically, what's the word? Remorseful. You've got to project an air of being cowed somewhat. So there's that. There's very clearly a central workshopped line, which is variation on "I apologise for my part in what happened on day 3 of the Newlands test." I know we talked a lot about Sandpaper a couple of weeks ago, but here we are. This is what the number is about. And then basically it's just slight variations in repeating. So we've got apologies to the Australian fans. We've got apologies to the teammates. We've got apologies to Cricket Australia. We've got apologies to the cricketing nation of South Africa. We've got apologies to non-cricket fan Australians. What we don't get is any sort of description of what actually happened, what anybody did, what anybody used to do it. It's all for my part in what happened at this time. Okay, so what happened? Well, I'm not going to say what happened. I'm just going to say that I shouldn't have done it. And the my part in it bit feels like it's carefully workshopped to be exculpatory, to sort of carve out, well, I was a component of it, but it wasn't entirely my fault. And that's true, and I think that's probably okay. I think that he was entitled to do the my part thing. I don't have a huge issue with that because he wasn't acting. He wasn't a lone bomber here. We will, in all probability, never get a full account of everything that happened in that dressing room. That's a separate conversation. The press conference, where he fucked up, was he left it too long. It's hard to generate legit emotion when something has been workshopped to within an inch of its life. Right? And you're right about that presser. If you want to, Smith got it bang on, and I know you got all the football fans who cried on the telly. Cried on the telly wasn't a bad thing for Smith to do. From a pure PR perspective, to show that raw emotion with his dad with the hand on the shoulder and like feeling every sentence, and that you felt what Smith was saying. It was impossible to arrive at any other conclusion than he was utterly mortified. With Warner, it was a press event with a well-known Sydney publicist who'd arranged the whole thing for him, which is fine. I've got no problem with how it was construed, but he shouldn't have waited. He should have got out ahead of it. If I were advising him, I would have said, mate, the best thing you can do is eat all the shit sandwich here and now. And he would have cried had he been doing it in Johannesburg or Cape Town. He didn't need to wait to get back to Sydney and then wait a couple more days thereafter. I reckon he did it on a Sunday with Smith's on a Friday. So, and there's expectation management issues because Smith's was so emotional that you had to meet that bar. No tears, no legitimacy. So you got to cry.
I'm being super cynical here. I acknowledge.
How do you make yourself cry? I mean, I don't think he's got the acting chops to go.
I don't think it's quite. I don't think this is quite sort of. Who's famously been able to manufacture like the single. Nothing compared to Sinead O'Connor. I don't think it's that level of control or anything like that. I'm not saying that there wasn't pressure. He would have been emotional and pent up, but the actual, I think we've all seen people who've been able to turn it on, and he felt he needed to turn it on. It clear as day. That the breaking of the voice, the whole bit. It's exactly what it looks like at the time. A guy who was doing what he felt he needed to do, and I understand that he was under immense pressure. I'm not saying that by dint of that press conference it turns him into the only villain in this story. It just didn't help him at the time. From my perspective.
I think the only line that sort of felt genuine in the whole thing was that he says, I wanted to bring glory to the team and then made a decision that had the opposite effect or something like that, something to that effect, which was just not a bad line.
Yeah, it's true. And the other thing is that what happened to Warner, and I said it on the day and I'll keep saying it forever, what happened to Warner and Candace, his wife, that week was a fucking disgrace. And it went on from from Durban to Port Elizabeth, from Port Elizabeth to Cape Town. I was there in the commentary box the day before with the wives and girlfriends, as they used to call it. Don't know whether they call it that anymore. Box away from us, and they were saying extraordinary things to her that day before, which I won't repeat, which are just unacceptable. None of those blokes were getting kicked out of the ground. The family were under immense pressure. As we now know, she was pregnant at the time, which would have made it yet worse. And Cricket Australia did put a statement out that morning about the South African crowd's treatment of Warner and his wife. And Darren Lehman did do the press conference the night before and took this head on. So there was all of this context which led towards this horrific decision being made. So I'm not saying that there wasn't wider pressure on Warner, which made him emotional and all of that. I think I'm being fairly cynical by saying do it at the time when you are feeling at your most pent up and you're most emotional and you're more likely to look legit rather than, right, this is the bit in the press conference where I need to be emotional.
Yeah, a lot of it's stuff that I wrote about in the book, if anybody's hasn't read that and is interested in it, in that we're sort of looking at why people using Warner's family to attack him wasn't actually about him, like why it was, why that's, I suppose why in a patriarchal structure, why a way to insult men, why people think that it's a reasonable way to insult men by using women who are in their families as a way to attack them, and that's somehow legitimized when actually, that's legitimized because we don't like that guy, when you're still exploiting somebody else in order to try to get to that person. Totally. And you're doing it for weird, old-fashioned reasons, weird judgmental things about female sexuality that shouldn't apply in a modern world. So there's all of that. But there's also the fact that Warner was going to South Africa to Bull Tampa before any of that happened. He was doing it in Durban before any words had been said. He went to that country with that intention. I'm very confident about that. And the research backing that up is in the book as well. But yeah, it's interesting, I suppose, how little is said or how insincere some of it turns out to be. So, he talks, he has a couple of comments about feeling bad for his teammates and missing them and so on, which potentially is true. But he talks about how he let down his teammates. That doesn't line up with the way that the Warner story later is sort of briefed out, where he's gives the impression that he was hard done by in the whole situation. He talks about supporting the Cricket Australia review when later he'll appeal against the punishments that came out of the findings. And then there's the question and answer section, which was very ill-advised at the end because he doesn't answer any of the questions, like why bother taking questions? So the questions he get asked are, how much did abuse of your wife play a role? Who else was involved? Did you orchestrate it? Are you being singled out? And his responses to that are just repetitions of the same line. I'm here to take responsibility for my part in what happened on day 3 of the test in Cape Town. And so he doesn't actually answer those questions. The only questions that he gives a partial answer to are, there's a question of, are you surprised by the ferocity of the response? And given it's a one-match ban, did you not realise how big a deal it was? And he does reply to that and say, I'm not surprised at all. We let our country down. We made a bad decision. I played my part in that. So he goes back to his script there. There's a question that says, have you ruined your relationship with the Australian cricket team? And he says, it's hard to sit here seeing my friends, my family playing in the 4th test. There is one sort of sincere line where he says, I wish and hope that Steve and Cameron have the same kind of support that I have, which I think is a bit more genuine. And then, the one that almost finishes it off, I couldn't quite pick up who was asking the question, but she says, can you, hand on your heart, say that you've never done this before in any match? You've never been involved in trying to do it, and to your knowledge, it has never happened in any other Australian match. And it's real deer in the headlights stuff. He just sits there and goes, ooh, and he goes, I would I'm here to take responsibility for my part in what happened. And the questioner says, so that question's just going to hang in the air forever? And he doesn't answer that, and then pretty soon afterwards leaves. And then they do the TV journo bit where they shout questions at him as he leaves, having not asked him the question during the press conference. Was it your idea? Was it your idea, David? So they can try to manufacture some sort of drama as he's walking out, like he's running away from the questions. But he didn't answer any of the questions. So, it lands where it lands now, which is still that nobody's actually given a frank account of what happened, and if they ever will. Who knows? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe who cares? But I suppose it lands in this situation where that in that particular test match, like people want to know who's responsible. There's always been that assessment that the fast bowlers must have known about it. The ball in Cape Town wasn't changed by the umpire, so it probably didn't have time to get damaged, but the ball in Port Elizabeth certainly did. You go back and read Dan Brettig's match report from that day where Australia had the ball reversing for about 80 overs all through the day. Mitchell Marsh was reversing it. Everybody was reversing it. So they knew that the ball was doing shitloads, and they knew that work was being done to it, but maybe I'm gullible, but I'm inclined to believe they didn't necessarily know the methods that were being used. It was just something that, if you're a fast bowler, as long as the ball is in good condition to use, you don't really need to know what's being done to it. And some people think that's impossible. They say fast bowlers are very possessive about it, but I also think you look at the personalities you've got going around at the time. Pat Cummins had just come back into that team, less than a year earlier, was pretty young and unestablished. Hazelwood's never been a loud, boisterous figure. Mitchell Stark's the only one who might have had have been more pushy about demanding certain standards, but he'd just taken 9 wickets in Durban. So I tend to think that if the ball's doing what you want it to do, you don't necessarily need to worry about the detail of the method.
It's difficult to know. Like a lot of things in life, anyone who says emphatically they know what happened is it doesn't. There's grey area everywhere, and that's how it will remain. People will emphatically say the ball was worked on in Perth with subterranean means because of the ball that knocked over James Vince. Going on, no, look at the pitch. Then they'll say, well, but what about the ball that knocked over, Hazelwood knocked over someone, was it Bairstow? On the
MCG.
No, Perth again. Perth again. Yeah. There was a ball that knocked over, I think it was Bairstow, second innings, final day after, and it landed in the wet patch. But look at that one. It went, I'm like, but look at where it landed. But look at Cummins stepping on the ball the day before at Cape Town. It proves he was trying to, okay, right. So in his follow through, when he stomped on the ball, as bowlers have been doing forever, that was strategically to get one part of the ball scuffed up, was it? A lot of this from people that never played cricket. A lot of this from people that never had a ball in their hand in their lives. What about the, but Jimmy Anderson's been tampering. You can see it as it was at the MCG, what with the umpires right next to him. A lot of gibber from people that never played cricket. So I'm very, very aware of that media fucking psychodrama, not it being divorced from what actually happened. What actually happened is known by probably 5 or 6 people in the world. If and when they choose to talk about it, that'll be fascinating. Until such time, we are speculating. The ball did reverse at Port Elizabeth, and the ball's reversed lots of times through the course of cricketing history. We know that people did work on the ball with all sorts of funny different methods because people have done the journalism on that. Vicious piece, which I've come back to from the day, which spoke to countless people telling him, almost bragging to him off the record or on background, not off the record, about the ways in which they used to work the ball in county cricket. The Duplessis moment a couple of years before that. Well,
more than that. In 4 years before that, South Africa had been done 3 times. I mean, they hadn't been punished the first time, but you had de Villiers with his wicket-keeping gloves. You had Faf with the zip, and you had Faf with the mitts. So that was 3 times in 4 years.
And there would have been a procedural...
It was standard.
And that's right. It was standard. It was like, this is just the thing you try and get away with to the point where you don't get away with it anymore. The throwing the ball into the turf from the outfield. Everyone pushed the dare I say it, the line on the basis that it was seen as like a bit of a game within a game. To what extent could you work the ball and get away with it before the umpires changed it over? That was the culture of the way the ball was being worked on. And obviously Sandpaper.
And the answer was don't do it like a massive dumbass with a fluorescent object that everybody can see.
Sandpaper was the equivalent of the fucking atomic bomb when it came to this practice. There was conventional weapons being used. Excuse this horrible analogy. There was conventional weapons being used, and then they got their nuke out, and of course that had the mushroom cloud over the game in Australia that lasted for a number of years. So but I'm come back to my original point in this part of this answer. wait till the people who were there want to talk about it on that day.
One other thing, side related to this, is like, everybody loves reverse swing. This is something else I wrote about. Everyone loves the result. They just don't like the methods of getting there. But it hasn't felt as missed and as necessary now that the last few years when the pitches have been spicy across the world, we haven't been sitting there going, oh, geez, we really need reverse swing, because you needed it when the pitches were flat. You needed it when nothing else was happening. Whereas, we've had a better competitive balance in Test cricket, so reverse hasn't been sorely missed.
I don't know. Like it's pick your poison, isn't it? Do you want to see the ball? Do you want to see I'm trying to think of do you want to see Kyle Jamieson? No, he's too good to lump in and suggest that it was all that. I'm not landing on the right bowler. Do you want to see someone who in another era wouldn't do as well, before wobble seam and before pitches had grass standing up high, before drop-in technology improved? Is that what you prefer? Or do you prefer, Waqar Younis going around corners when the ball's 80 overs old? And look, it's not as though teams have not got the ball to reverse thereafter. The Pakistan 2022 story with Australia winning at Lahore is a huge reverse story. But no one's suggesting they were tampering with the ball then. It was the conditions were so dry that it was all about maintaining one side of the ball and to keep it as dry as possible, which is, of course, how reverse swing, in theory, is meant to work. As I said before, everyone, though, it got into an arms race. It got into a fucking, they were all into it. Everyone was into it in different ways. Do you reckon people are spitting on the ball at the moment? Like, fair income, do we think, because the IPL have lifted the ban, right?
Yeah.
So MCC laws of the game. BCCI lifted it for the IPL, right? Saliva on the ball. Do we genuinely think that in cricket around the world, people aren't putting saliva on the ball to make the ball shinier, to get convinced? Of course they fucking are. Because there's no cameras training. There's no Super Sport 36 cameras going around with the ball. Of course they're fucking spitting on the ball. Why would they not? Why would they, I think the MCC should change the laws of the game and permit saliva again for that exact reason. But,
I think they should permit reverse swing for that reason. Get a bit of ball tampering back in the game. Why not? Stop being so precious about it.
I just still think, I don't think any of them are going to do it. I genuinely don't think it. Warner's not writing this book that people speak of. And Smith would be fucking mental to do it, given the commercial opportunities he's got staring him in the face after cricket. Likewise, the Quicks. They've all forgiven and forgotten. They've been the number one team in the world. They're all mates. Yeah, there's some rogue elements to any cricket team, and Warner is the most abrasive of those personalities. But Warner's just signed a multi-year contract with Foxtel. They're going to go away and blow that up for what? For what game? What game? What point? Yeah. Everyone assumes that his story would be that everyone else knew it anyway.
Yep. And if Bancroft does a story now, they'll just run the disgruntled former employee sort of approach and write off anything he says.
He'd be even crazier than Steve Smith to talk about it, because he's probably, in some respects, while still an active player, the one with the most likely to get an extended run in the Aussie team at some point.
But if he doesn't, there might be a point in a few years.
5 years' time or something. Yeah. I don't think he will, but maybe. Yeah.
Anyway.
Would fuck his life. He would do it, and then no one would talk to him.
He would do it, but also they would just say, oh, well, it's not true. Made it up. He's salty, blah, blah, blah. He's still the one who lost out of it the hardest. Yeah. Anyway, we've talked about that for more than long enough.
More than we planned.
Far more than we planned.
Before we pull stumps on this, a reminder that our patrons, what makes this all happen for us day to day, patreon.com/thefinalword, permits us to tell the stories like the one that Jeff's just told in some depth for Alex Brown, who's been with us since 2019 when this Discord channel, when Patreon started, before the Discord channel. So there are lots of ways you can support us. The most practical way is joining Patreon. And if you do work for an organisation who does have a marketing budget and does want to use it creatively during the England summer and does want to amplify your message to literally millions of people, then please email me as soon as you hear this. Do not wait. Get in now. How's that sound?
I have a confirmation for you, Adam, from Jamie Miller Pope about £3.80, the CBBS number, the story you told about Abtaha Maqsood. Jamie says, absolutely nailed the nerd pledge, took the conversation in exactly the direction intended of inclusivity and the Glasgow, Scotland connection. So there's one for your post-Edinburgh weekend.
Yep, and we'll be back with a final word cricket team that's going to be up that way in August, where we're playing in Stirling, halfway between Edinburgh and Glasgow, playing for the Tabs.
Where I will once again attempt to be in Scotland without you're dying en route.
Yeah, you're in the mixer for it. You've got a bedroom that
just anxious now.
They've got bought for you for it.
I'm just like, am I cursed?
Yeah. Indeed. Right. Well, I probably should get downstairs and tend to my children and then have some food. So that's it. That's story time 230. It's been a long one. It's been a fun one. I don't know when it's going out, but it's going out sometime soon, which means that you'll be hearing plenty more eps in the feed from him, Jeff Lemon, and from me, Adam Collins. Between times, have a nice weekend.
Ciao, Bellas.